Well, good morning, good evening, wherever you may be. I am Pastor Colin Newharth of St. Luke's Lutheran Church in Wishick, North Dakota, and welcome to Studying God's Word, a partnership ministry with Trinity Lutheran Church in Bismarck, North Dakota. So this week we are taking a look at our gospel reading for this Sunday, and it's from the 17th chapter of Luke, verses 11 through 19. And it's a fairly short passage, but it's a very powerful text because it is it is showing Jesus' miracles. Number two, it is showing God's mercy and what that's all about. What is God's mercy? And how do we embrace it? So we'll just start at verse 11. So Jesus, the setting of this is that Jesus is traveling to Jerusalem, and he's having to go through all these different regions, these different villages. Mainly, it's between Samaria and Galilee. And so he is traveling through kind of his um, home area and also through places that his people or the culture that he was born into would have detested or looked down upon. Mainly, I'm talking about Samaria. So if you're familiar with that, that's where the word or the designation Samaritan comes from, and that's why there's significance in stories like the Good Samaritan. That's where um, like in emergency services, Good Samaritan laws, that's where that language comes from, is referring way back in Jesus' time to somebody who is from Samaria. And we'll get a little more into that as we move along. So that's where we're finding Jesus. That's setting. He's on a road somewhere, traveling through these villages, region of Samaria, region of Galilee, on his way to Jerusalem. And so he's coming to one of these villages, right? And he's passing through, and there are 10 lepers that approach him. So let's talk about leprosy for a second. Not the most enjoyable topic to really talk about. Um, Leprosy is this disease that eats away at the skin, the muscle. It's basically, I'm no medical expert. I think it's bacterial. I think. I don't know. Medical people out there, please set me straight on this. I know the theological part of it. Um so today it is curable if it's caught soon enough, but what it does is it eats away the flesh off of the bone, basically. It's a very nasty disease. Well, 2,000 years ago, medical knowledge is not what it is today. And so, what would happen is if you had leprosy or whatever they referred to it as back then, if you had that disease, you were an outcast. You were basically cast out of whatever community you were born into, and then you were generally put into groups with other people with leprosy, and you were put somewhere remote, like uh, mostly like if a deserted cave or some sort of island, or some some sort of very remote, very desolate type place. And actually, if we look into history of leprosy, which that's a whole nother conversation we can have, um, they were doing that, like secluding people with leprosy up until the early 20th century or so, where even in the US, you find there were there is some islands off of the coasts that people with certain diseases would go to and basically be shunned away from society. That's what's happening here. So there are 10 of these lepers in this type of a group in this village, and they come up to Jesus. And as you can probably imagine after what I've just explained to you, um, as you can probably imagine, they don't live that great of a life, honestly. Socially, they're outcast. Mentally and physically, they're exhausted because they're fighting a disease they know nothing about, basically a death sentence. And so they're very desperate for any type of help, any type of help. So it's, as you can imagine, their cries and their pleadings to Jesus, saying, Jesus, Master, have mercy on us, come from deep within, because they are just that desperate to get relief and to get help. And so we're picking up on verse 14 here. So Jesus obviously takes note, and obviously he has answered their cries for mercy. Because he says, go and show yourselves to the priests. He says nothing more, nothing less. Now, I would imagine at this point, the lepers are the people with leprosy are kind of confused, because they're like, what? He didn't really do anything. Just from a human standpoint. But it says here, as they traveled to the priests, because the priests were like the lawmakers who determined who was in, who was out, who was in what social class, all that kind of stuff. Again, another longer conversation. But what they were doing is they made their way to the priests. I would guess they were kind of skeptical a little bit, and they were going about their business. And all of a sudden they were made clean, like it never even happened. Can you imagine that? You have this disease that's eating away at your fingers, at your toes, everywhere. And then all of a sudden you're walking down this road as Jesus told you to do. And all of a sudden you look like everybody else. You look normal. You are allowed to lead a normal life again. Just imagine the emotional struggle of these people who have / had leprosy. It would almost be unbelievable. So verse 15 is our turning point in this gospel lesson. Okay. Because it says, then one of them, meaning the lepers, when he saw that he was healed, turned back, praising God with a loud voice. Again, we can take this as a myriad of different reactions. It just so happens that one of them was attributing it to where it came from. Where it came from was God. And so he was praising God in a loud voice. And it says he prostrated himself, that he laid down before Jesus' feet. And he thanked him. And then the gospel specifically mentions that this specific man was a Samaritan. So there's a little bit more to unpack there, because by saying he was a Samaritan, one, it was societally objectable to help any sort of Samaritan as Jesus being a Galilean. There was just a rift there. And then it goes to show that Jesus is there for everybody, not just the ones who are prim and proper, not just the perfect ones, not just the people who are the same sort of culture as he is. No, Jesus is there for everybody, and God's mercy is there for everybody. So then Jesus asked, "Were not 10 made clean, but the other 9, where are they? Was none of them found to return and give praise to God except this foreigner?" So Jesus realizes what is going on here. He notices that only one of them turned back after they were made clean and were praising God. Now, there can be a host of reasons for this. Again, as we talked about, many different human beings have many different reactions to many different things. And this is one of those times where it just so happens one of them faithfully attributed it to God, even though it was God and Jesus Christ for all of them. So then Jesus said to the man, closing out our passage, he says, "Get up and go on your way. Your faith has made you well." Your faith has made you well. So the overarching message of this passage is that Jesus is there for everybody and is there for us mercifully. And we can return to God's mercy in Jesus Christ because of the cross. That's the point of this. Whether we are that one person that praises God for everything that we have or the miracles that have happened, or one of those 9 who ignore it, or even worse, maybe don't even recognize God at work, we can always return to God's love and mercy.